I want to pivot a little bit, talk about the transition from player to referee more specifically. As a point guard, did you feel like there were skills, there were abilities that you had developed in your playing career that helped you kind of transfer into the craft of officiating? What made the transition even easier for you?
I don't think so much as being a point guard, but it did help because as a point guard, you got to know all the situations, for your team and what's going on in the game. So um, I struggle with trying to pay attention to the clock and watch the game. I won't say like as a point guard, just as a player.
Yeah.
Just as a player, it helped me because there's a rhythm to the game, and I try to, as a player, you want to be in the rhythm. You want to make the calls and make the plays or see the plays just like the game is being flowed because you don't want to interrupt the game. And sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing. But just to be in the rhythm of the game and so that I fit, so that I don't stand out. Some of that's a double-edged sword because I don't want to fit in like a player because I'm a ref. But just to have that rhythm, that helped a lot of knowing what the game was, how the game is supposed to be played, what the teams are calling, knowing what they're looking for. That kind of helped me get to the NBA as a ref.
Now that you've been looking at the game from this lens, if you were to go back to your time as a player, is there anything you would do differently having studied the game now as an official for the last 15, 20 years?
I probably would have asked for the rule book. um, most guys don't even know that they're doing stuff. It's just what you grew up doing. You never knew you slid your foot 3 feet, Paul Pierce, to get to your right hand because you're only going to go right. So he would change his foot or move that left foot so he could create some space. But you never knew that because you just played and nobody looked for it. Technology today and everything that's going on. As a player back then, I wish I would have, been in a rule book to know what I could really do and what I could use to my advantage.
James, it's a lot like the things we've been talking about recently, in terms of just the rule awareness of not just players, but even coaches in some cases too.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about that. What teams could benefit from learning more about the rules, the mechanics, just because most of them, as you say, they don't know. And so because they don't know how necessarily how to use the rules to their advantage, competitive advantage. I remember back in the day when the old clear path rule, a lot of times the guy would just go up for a layup and just get fouled from behind. And we would say all the time, like, if he just got fouled, just stop, they got fouled. I don't know whether they get 2 shots, but they get the ball too. But they didn't know that about the rule. And so they never knew how to just take advantage of a competitive advantage of the rules as they're written. So it's definitely something we think players, coaches, if they just learned a little bit, listen, you're not going to learn all the rules, but just a couple of them could definitely be very impactful for your team.
Well, I would kind of continue with that, James. I feel like as a kid, as you develop, it should be a part of your development. Pros are, they know a little bit. They're a little bit better than regular with college and high school or AAU. They're a little better. It should be in the development of players.
So, Haywood, we had a question from Morris in our audience. He asked Mr. Haywood, did you ever have to go through the grassroots camp?
No, it didn't go through the grassroots, but I helped. I was a counselor at a couple of those, so I understood what they were going through. My grassroots was Jim Bertolero walking behind me at the Drew and at the Tennessee. That was my grassroots.
Yeah, to piggyback on Haywood Morris, they didn't have grassroots wasn't quite a thing like when James and I and when Haywood were coming through. That whole program, the grassroots program, wasn't in play yet. That's something they developed a little bit after we got hired. So you kind of had to be in the right place at the right time and someone seeing you at a camp or seeing you referee a game in order to be found, quote unquote. And then from there, they would watch you a little bit here at this camp or that camp, and eventually you hope to get invited to the NBA Summer League. And then you had to perform well at NBA Summer League to get hired into the Development League, and then you'd referee the Development League or the CBA right before that, and then eventually maybe even the WNBA, and then finally the NBA. So that was the process until they started the grassroots program, probably about 10 years ago, I think.
Well, we got the history of the grassroots program brought to us by Kane Fitzgerald. So thank you for that, Kane. That is helpful context. I didn't know that at all.